Navigating Organizational Change, Evidence-Based Strategies for Managing Uncertainty and Building Capability. Abstract. Organizational change initiatives fail at alarming rates, often due to inadequate attention to human and capability dimensions. This article synthesizes evidence from 32 empirical studies examining employee experiences during organizational transitions. Change creates significant uncertainty that affects both organizational performance and individual well-being. However, organizations can mitigate negative effects through transparent communication, procedural justice, employee participation, capability development, and supportive leadership. The article presents evidence-based interventions demonstrated across healthcare, manufacturing, technology, and public sectors. Long-term success requires recalibrating psychological contracts, building adaptive capacity, and embedding continuous learning systems. By addressing both immediate transition challenges and foundational organizational capabilities, leaders can transform change from a source of disruption into a mechanism for sustainable competitive advantage. The only constant is change has become organizational cliché, yet most change efforts still fail. Hughes, 2011, critically examined claims that 70% of change initiatives fail to achieve objectives, finding that while the exact figure is debated, systematic evidence confirms that organizational transformation remains extraordinarily difficult. The challenge isn't recognizing the need for change, it's managing the human and organizational consequences. Contemporary organizations face unprecedented change drivers, technological disruption, evolving workforce expectations, regulatory shifts, and market volatility. A comprehensive review of 32 empirical studies by Reinholm et al. 2024 reveals that employee experiences during organizational change significantly influence outcomes. Yet many leaders underestimate the psychological and operational complexities involved. The stakes are substantial. Change initiatives that fail waste resources, erode trust, and diminish organizational capacity for future adaptation. Conversely, well-managed transitions can strengthen capabilities, enhance engagement, and position organizations for sustained success. This article examines evidence-based strategies for navigating organizational change, drawing on verified empirical research and concrete organizational examples. The organizational change landscape defining change in contemporary organizations. Organizational change encompasses deliberate efforts to alter structures, processes, technologies, or cultures. By 2005, changes vary along multiple dimensions, scope, from incremental adjustments to wholesale transformation, speed, gradual evolution versus rapid restructuring, initiation, strategic choice versus crisis response, impact, affecting specific functions versus enterprise-wide systems. Reinholm et al. 2024 found that regardless of type, organizational change creates uncertainty, ambiguity about future states, role expectations, job security, and organizational direction. This uncertainty triggers psychological and behavioral responses that directly affect change outcomes. State of practice: why change remains difficult despite decades of change management literature. Implementation success remains elusive. Bice, 2005, critical review identified several persistent challenges: communication breakdowns, information flows inadequately between leadership and frontline employees. Balogun, 2003, found that middle managers often receive incomplete information while being expected to implement directives, creating cascading confusion. Underestimating emotional responses: change evokes anxiety, resistance, and stress that rational business cases cannot address alone. Kavanagh and Eshkenazi, 2006, documented how emotional reactions during change influence employee attitudes and behaviors. Capability gaps: organizations announce new strategies without ensuring employees possess necessary skills. Hetzner et al. 2009 demonstrated that competence development during change directly affects both outcomes and employee well-being. Process failures. Change efforts lack systematic approaches to stakeholder engagement. Feedback integration and iterative adjustment. Van der Voort. 2016. Contemporary changes also frequently overlap, creating change saturation. Stensaker and Meyer, 2012, found that simultaneous initiatives amplify uncertainty and drain organizational capacity, highlighting the need for more coordinated approaches. Organizational and individual consequences of change. Organizational performance impacts. Poorly managed change erodes multiple performance dimensions. Reinholm et al. 2024, synthesized evidence showing that uncertainty during transitions affects productivity disruptions. Employees distracted by uncertainty and ambiguity demonstrate reduced task focus. Bourdieu et al. 2011, found that change-related uncertainty correlated with decreased job satisfaction and organizational commitment, which subsequently affected performance. Knowledge loss. Restructuring often triggers voluntary turnover of experienced staff. Stensaker et al. 2008, documented how capability depletion during reorganization compromised operational effectiveness, particularly when tacit knowledge disappeared with departing employees. Innovation suppression. Change creates risk aversion. Kim et al. 2011, demonstrated that uncertainty during organizational transitions reduced creative behaviors and willingness to experiment, precisely when adaptation requires innovation. Coordination failures. New structures and processes create temporary confusion about responsibilities, decision rights, and workflows. Balogun and Johnson, 2005, showed how implementation challenges arise when middle managers interpret change differently than executives intended. Individual well-being and stakeholder impacts beyond organizational metrics. Change affects human experiences and outcomes. Stress and health effects. Organizational transitions elevate stress, anxiety, and health complaints. Lee and Choi, 2021, found significant relationships between change processes and employee well-being, with effects persisting beyond implementation periods. Psychological contract violations. Change often alters implicit employment agreements. Rousseau, 1995, established that when organizations modify terms unilaterally, affecting job security, career paths, or work conditions, employees experience betrayal and reduce commitment. Capability anxiety. Employees worry about possessing skills for new roles. Hetzner et al. 2009, demonstrated that perceived competence strongly influenced stress levels during organizational change. Equity concerns. Change outcomes often distribute unevenly, creating perceptions of unfairness. Neves, 2011, showed that when employees perceive change processes as unjust, they withdraw support regardless of change necessity. These individual consequences cascade into organizational effects through absenteeism, turnover, resistance, and disengagement, creating vicious cycles that undermine change initiatives. Evidence-based organizational responses. Transparent, consistent communication strategies. High-quality information reduces uncertainty. Reinholm et al. 2024, found that communication practices strongly influenced employee experiences across studies. Effective approaches include early, honest disclosure, sharing information about changes, rationales and timelines before rumors spread. Two-way dialogue, creating forums for questions, concerns, and feedback rather than one-way announcements. Acknowledging uncertainty, admitting what leaders don't yet know builds credibility. Lines. 2005, consistent messaging, ensuring alignment across leadership levels and communication channels. Addressing WEAM, explicitly discussing what's in it for me. From employee perspectives. Cleveland Clinic exemplifies communication excellence during its 2009 restructuring. Facing financial pressures, leadership held town halls, departmental meetings, and one-on-one conversations to explain necessity. Outline options considered, and describe decision rationales. They created anonymous feedback channels and responded publicly to common questions. This transparency, while not eliminating anxiety, maintained trust and engagement throughout difficult transitions. Procedural justice and employee participation. How decisions are made matters as much as what is decided. Neves, 2011, demonstrated that procedural justice, fairness in decision processes, predicted employee support for change initiatives. Key practices: genuine consultation, involving affected employees in problem solving. Not just informing them of predetermined solutions. Voice opportunities, creating mechanisms for input that demonstrably influence decisions. Bourdieu et al. 2011, transparent criteria, explaining how decisions about restructuring, role assignments or resource allocation are made. Consistent application, applying stated criteria uniformly across groups. Microsoft's transition to cloud-first strategy involved extensive consultation with engineering teams. Rather than mandating approaches top-down, leadership engaged developers in co-designing migration paths, tooling investments, and skill development programs. This participation transformed potential resistance into ownership, accelerating adoption while preserving institutional knowledge. Targeted capability building, addressing competence gaps reduces anxiety and enables performance. Spencer and Spencer, 1993, established that competency models should align individual capabilities with strategic requirements, particularly crucial during transitions. Effective capability interventions, skills assessments, identifying specific gaps between current and required competencies. Structured learning programs, providing training, coaching and mentoring tailored to new role demands. Hetzner et al. 2009, practice opportunities, creating low-stakes environments for skill application before full implementation. Competence signaling, explicitly recognizing and validating developing capabilities to build confidence. Siemens invested heavily in workforce reskilling during its digital transformation. The company created Siemens Digital Academy, offering modular training in data analytics, automation, and digital tools. Importantly, they mapped competency development to career pathways, showing employees how new skills connected to future opportunities. This reduced anxiety about obsolescence while building organizational capability. Supportive leadership throughout transitions. Leadership behaviors strongly influence change experiences. Hui, 2002, found that middle managers' emotional balancing, attending to psychological responses while maintaining momentum, critically affected change success. Effective leadership practices, empathetic listening, understanding and validating employee concerns without dismissing them. Psychological safety, encouraging questions, admitting mistakes and treating setbacks as learning opportunities. Bartunek et al. 2006, visible commitment, leaders modeling new behaviors and visibly participating in changes they sponsor. Distributed leadership, empowering informal leaders and change champions at multiple organizational levels. NHS England exemplifies supportive leadership during care pathway redesign. Clinical leaders conducted listening tours, meeting frontline staff to understand concerns about proposed changes. They acknowledged legitimate challenges, adjusted implementation timelines based on feedback, and celebrated early wins. This approach built coalition across traditionally skeptical medical staff. Financial and transition support. Material support demonstrates organizational commitment to employee well-being during change. Hornung and Rousseau, 2007, showed that customized employment arrangements, idiosyncratic deals tailored to individual circumstances, can ease transitions. Support mechanisms, transition assistance, outplacement services, severance packages, and career counseling for displaced employees. Retention incentives, bonuses or recognition for employees whose expertise is critical during transitions. Flexibility provisions, adjusted schedules, Remote work options or reduced expectations during high-stress periods. Professional development funding, supporting credential acquisition or conference attendance related to new roles. AT&T's Workforce 2020 initiative, while involving significant restructuring, included $1 billion investment in employee reskilling. The company offered tuition assistance, online degrees, and nano degrees in emerging technology areas, enabling employees to transition into new roles rather than facing displacement. Building long-term adaptive capacity. Recalibrating psychological contracts. Successful organizations move beyond episodic change to create expectation of continuous evolution. Rousseau, 1995, emphasized that psychological contracts, implicit mutual expectations between employees and employers, must evolve with organizational realities. Approaches for contract evolution, explicit discussion, openly addressing how employment relationships are changing rather than hoping employees will adjust silently. Mutual value creation, framing adaptability as beneficial to both organizational competitiveness and employee marketability. Career flexibility, replacing rigid hierarchical paths with diverse development opportunities that accommodate change. Reciprocal commitment, organizations investing in employability while expecting flexibility from employees. Organizations that successfully recalibrate contracts emphasize mutual investment in capability development. They acknowledge that while specific roles may shift, commitment to employee growth remains constant. Developing dynamic capabilities. T-Sit al. 1997, defined dynamic capabilities as organizational capacities to sense opportunities, seize them through resource reconfiguration, and transform to maintain competitiveness. Change management essentially builds these capabilities. Key elements: environmental scanning systems, structured approaches to detecting emerging trends, competitive threats and opportunity signals, rapid experimentation protocols, processes for testing new approaches quickly and learning from results. Cohen and Leventhal. 1990, reconfiguration flexibility, organizational designs that enable resource redeployment without excessive disruption. Absorptive capacity, ability to recognize, assimilate, and apply external knowledge. Cohen and Leventhal. 1990, organizations with strong dynamic capabilities treat change as ongoing capability development rather than discrete events requiring separate change management. Embedding continuous learning systems. Sustained adaptability requires systematic learning. Boyatsis, 1982, established that competency development follows cyclical patterns requiring practice, feedback, and reflection. Learning system components, after-action reviews, structured reflections following change initiatives to capture lessons. Knowledge repositories, accessible databases of change experiences, successes and failures. Communities of practice, forums where change practitioners share experiences and develop collective expertise. Westerberg and Tafvelin. 2014, developmental feedback, regular input on change leadership behaviors. Not just outcomes. Failure normalization, cultural acceptance that experimentation involves setbacks. Toyota's continuous improvement, Kaizen, culture exemplifies embedded learning. The organization systematically captures process innovations from frontline employees, tests promising ideas, and diffuses successful practices. This creates organizational muscle memory for adaptation that transcends specific change initiatives. Conclusion: organizational change remains challenging, but evidence clearly indicates that outcomes depend significantly on how human and capability dimensions are managed. The 32 empirical studies reviewed by Reinholm et al. 2024 demonstrate that uncertainty, the core employee experience during transitions, can be substantially mitigated through deliberate organizational interventions. Actionable imperatives for leaders: communicate transparently and consistently, acknowledging uncertainty while providing maximum available clarity about changes. Rationales and impacts: ensure procedural justice through genuine participation. voice opportunities, and transparent decision criteria that build perceived fairness. Invest in capability development through targeted skill building that addresses competence gaps while reducing anxiety about obsolescence. Provide supportive leadership that balances task focus with empathetic attention to psychological responses throughout transitions. Recalibrate psychological contracts explicitly. Creating shared expectations about continuous adaptation as organizational reality. Build dynamic capabilities systematically. Developing organizational capacity to sense, seize, and transform in response to environmental demands. Embed continuous learning systems that capture change experiences and develop collective expertise in managing transitions. Change should not be managed as exceptional event requiring special mobilization. Instead, organizations must develop adaptive capacity as core competence, building systems, capabilities, and cultural norms that treat evolution as ongoing strategic work. The organizations that thrive amid continuous change don't simply react better to disruption. They develop capabilities that transform change from threat into competitive advantage, creating sustainable value while supporting human flourishing. The evidence is clear. These capabilities can be systematically developed through deliberate, evidence-based interventions that prioritize both organizational performance and individual well-being.